Some say the NBA Summer League means absolutely nothing, others depend on it for their projection of what's ahead. Regardless of where you stand, let's take a look at how every first round pick from the most recent 2023 NBA draft performed at this year's Summer League. With the very last selection of the first round, we saw the Los Angeles Clippers go with Missouri 6'7" forward Kobe Brown, someone that had a pretty solid summer league, especially beyond the perimeter, as he averaged 15 and 7, shooting 43% from 3 at decent volume. He's really shaping up to be a solid depth addition for this Clippers group, or at least a more valuable trade piece in a deal such as the rumored Harden one. Then we reach the Nuggets with their singular first round selection, another 6'7" forward that's coming off being one of the top names in college basketball, Gonzaga's Julian Strawther, someone who clearly hasn't shied away from the moment so far. He averaged 18 and 5. It was on just 40-34 splits, but you're going to see that's really not that bad for this year's rookie class. Now, it's also worth mentioning just how promising this summer league was for the Nuggets as a whole. Their second rounder out of Clemson, Hunter Tyson, was legitimately one of the best players. He averaged 21 and 6, shooting a ridiculous 54% from the field and 50% from 3 on over 7 attempts a game. A real case can be made he was the top rookie performer we saw out there. It didn't just stop at him. Their late first rounder from last season, Peyton Watson, was averaging an efficient 19. Their other second round pick this year, Jalen Pickett, averaged 12, 4, and 6 on grade splits. This is really scary for the rest of the league. They are retaining their entire starting lineup. Throughout the playoffs, we really only saw 3 main pieces off the bench: Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, and Christian Brown. They lost Bruce Brown and Jeff Green to free agency, undoubtedly big losses, but we saw a ton of good things from Christian Brown, especially down the stretch, where he was playing himself onto the court more and more. But they still had avoided those other 2 spots in the rotation, so they aggressively picked up late draft capital. They weren't searching for upside, they were looking for players to put on the court as a part of a contending group, something we don't typically see this late in the draft. But with what we saw in the Summer League, there's a lot of room to be confident they won't lose a step this season. 28 was made by the Utah Jazz, who selected Bryce Sensabaugh, who didn't participate as he's still recovering from injury. 27 was the Hornets with their second selection of the first round, where they took a shot on some of the most upside in the entire draft, Arkansas 2 guard Nick Smith Jr., someone that a year ago most projected as a top 5 pick in the draft. He was coming out of high school as the #1 guard in the country, but after a disappointing freshman season, really slowed down by injuries, he fell down to 27. His summer league had its ups and downs. Charlotte would leave winless, including their stints in both Sacramento and Las Vegas. In Sacramento, he averaged 13, 4, and 4 on pretty poor efficiency. In Vegas, he managed to up that to 15 on slightly better efficiency, but this is heavily inflated by one singular outing. Against the Blazers, he managed 33 points on incredible shooting from the field, a performance defined by his clear shot-creating talent. This performance really embodies what we've seen from him this past year. There's no question about the talent, there's no question about the potential. We've seen performances like this, but it's what we see before and after these outings that have many concerned. Now, on top of getting the top guard from last year's recruiting class, they also walked away from the draft with the second-rate guard, who they selected in the second round out of UCLA, Amari Bailey. His summer league wasn't all that notable, but not necessarily concerning. He averaged 8 points, shooting 37% from beyond the arc. At 26, we also saw the Pacers have their second selection of the night, where they would take someone that really climbed up the board during the pre-draft process, Belmont wing Ben Shepherd. His draft stock is really not hard to track down, a 6'6" wing that shot nearly 42% from 3 as a senior. Unsurprisingly, that's the skill set he displayed during the summer league. He averaged 11 points, pretty much exclusively scoring from beyond the arc, where he shot 39%. The 25th overall pick made its way to Detroit, who would end up selecting Houston guard Marcus Sasser. What a weird week he had. For most of his time in Las Vegas, things were not going great. His first 4 games saw him averaging less than 10 points on terrible 33-16 splits. In his final game, things started off much the same. He had 9 points at the half. He had shot just 3 for 11 from the field. But then he did this. He proceeds to go 13 for 14 in the second half, finishing the night with 40 points on the dot to go along with 5 assists to just 1 turnover. It's moments like this that make the Summer League so special. Many were probably starting to write off Sasser, but in just one half, that all changed. The 24th overall pick ended up in the hands of the Dallas Mavericks after a draft night trade where they would select combine standout and Marquette forward Olivier Max Prosper. Prosper played all 5 games, averaging 13 and 5, shooting 44% from the field and just 24% from 3. Not too terrible considering most of his value at this point surrounds his ability on the other end of the court. 23 to the Blazers was the twin brother of last year's 4th overall pick and Summer League MVP Keegan Murray, someone that actually played a couple Summer League games this year where it was just unfair. He averaged 31 points on ridiculous splits. His brother Chris hasn't quite gotten off to that same hot start. In his 5 games, we saw him averaging 10 points and 4 rebounds on 43-32 splits. 22 was Duke wing Derek Whitehead, who didn't play due to injury, but we did see the first of Brooklyn's back-to-back selections take the court. Alabama big Noah Clowney, who, well, struggled. His 5 games saw him averaging less than 5 points and 5 rebounds, shooting less than 23% from the field and just over 23% from 3. Oof. It was really their second-round selection stealing the show. One of the top names in college this past year, Kansas forward Jalen Wilson, he was averaging 18 and 8, shooting 46% from 3. With the 20th pick, we would see the Houston Rockets become a part of one of the biggest surprises of the draft, maybe even draft history. They ended up selecting Cam Whitmore, someone that just days before the draft, odds makers thought had a really solid chance to go as high as the 4th overall pick. Going into draft night, many didn't see a world where he would be on the board long after that. But due to reasons that are still somewhat mysterious to this day, especially with him making it very clear there's no injury, he falls all the way down to 20. Not just falls, but falls to the team that those odd makers thought might select him at 4. There's now a clear chip on his shoulder, and he was determined to show that in the Summer League. Whitmore ended up bringing home the MVP. He played a massive role in them going all the way to the Summer League championship game. He averaged over 19, 5, and 2, shooting 45% from the field and 29% from 3. That efficiency really doesn't even tell the full story. His first and championship games are really bringing that down quite a bit. In those middle 4 games, the amount that most of these rookies played, he was on a tear. In some stretches on both sides of the ball as well, he racked up 8 steals in the Rockets semifinal game. Now, I definitely think there were some concerning shot selection moments. I'm not sure the Rockets have a role for him on day 1 as a high-volume creator, but at the very least, it's clear that draft night fall hasn't wavered his confidence one bit. He was also far from the only positive thing to come out of this Summer League for the Rockets. Both Tari Eason and Jabari Smith, their first rounders from last season, looked absolutely unstoppable. And we haven't even gotten to their most recent top selection. But speaking of that championship game, it's worth mentioning the team they matched up with, as they don't actually have a first rounder this year. The Cleveland Cavaliers, the 2023 Summer League champions. They had a key contributor, especially down the stretch, that was one of the biggest names in the entire Summer League. Their recent second-round selection and former #1 recruit in the country, Emoni Bates. I saw him play multiple times out in Las Vegas, and while there's concerns about his size and length, he does not look small out there. He's a legit 6'9" with guard-like skills that made him one of the most sought-after prospects in the country at one point. It's really wild to think there was a time where we were envisioning Emoni Bates and Wembanyama at the top of the draft. But since leaving high school, Emoni's stock just continued to slide and slide. He goes to Memphis, struggles, goes to a small program in Eastern Michigan where he gets to put up crazy numbers, but on not so great efficiency. During this time, we also saw him deal with issues off the court. All this led to many seeing him going undrafted in this most recent draft. But after going to the combine, really impressing, absolutely dominating in the shooting drills, things finally started to uptrend for him. And the Cleveland Cavaliers decided to take a chance in the second round, a chance that right now seems well worth it. He just averaged 17 and 6, shooting 44% from the field and 40% from 3 on over 7 attempts a game. He looks like the real deal. The only concern going forward is actually getting the opportunity. We know he doesn't bring defense. He's a scorer through and through. It's tough to envision the Cavs looking for that in their rotation, especially at the wing after bringing in both Strus and Niang. But whether it's with the main roster or even their G League team, his future just got a lot more interesting. The Cavaliers also had more than just Bates to get excited about. Sam Merrill, a second-round selection a few years ago, just might have been the best player in Las Vegas, at least out of the players that played more than 2 games. He averaged over 20 points, but almost his entire production, 11 of his 13 shots a game, were coming beyond the arc, where he shot 45%. Insane. Just look at these clips. His release is lightning quick, and you're rarely seeing him even touch the rim. Now, what's so interesting here is he's not just some Summer League warrior about to get swooped up by another team. After a 10-day contract this past year, the Cavaliers signed him to a multi-year deal. We also saw Evan Mobley's brother Isaiah have a really good run. Between these 3, Cleveland's definitely added some really interesting young pieces at the end of their bench. I really hope we see some experimenting from them. The 19th selection to the Warriors was Brandon Podziemski, someone that a season ago couldn't even get on the court for Illinois. He averaged a singular point, but after transferring to Santa Clara and eventually putting up 29-4, shooting 44% from 3. He becomes the 19th pick in the draft. A remarkable story. Sadly though, his summer league didn't go quite as planned. He actually has one of the bigger sample sizes, having played 7 games between Sacramento and Las Vegas. In Sacramento, he did pretty decent, 15 a game, shooting 48% from the field. Vegas, not quite. 9 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists, definitely stuffing the box score numbers, but shooting just 26% from the field and 22% from 3. Leading up to the draft, there were some questions surrounding his ability to play the point guard position. I think he dismissed a lot of that. He really impressed as a playmaker. There's no question about it. It was a struggle to get the ball through the net. The Miami Heat don't have a first-round pick more years than not, but coming off their finals appearance, they actually held the 18th overall pick in the draft, a selection they would use to get a guy that for most of the year, even directly following the conclusion of the season, was projected as a second-round selection. But after a great pre-draft process, he was starting to climb the board, and the Heat eventually pulled the trigger in the middle of the first round. We're talking about UCLA forward Jaime Jaquez, someone that embodies the Heat culture to a point we rarely, if ever, have seen in the draft. It was a match made in heaven. He's a master of none, but brings respectable defense, playmaking, 3-level scoring, and most importantly, a clear dedication to do what's best for winning basketball games. In the summer league, he started out pretty hot. He dropped 22 points, shooting 8 for 15 from the field and 3 for 7 from 3. He followed that up by starting just 1 for 6 against the Kings before suffering a shoulder injury that would keep him out for the remainder of the summer league. I really do hope he's not involved in that inevitable Lillard deal. 17 was the Los Angeles Lakers, who selected Indiana point guard Jalen Hood-Schifino, someone that passed the eye test on both ends of the floor, but did struggle as a scorer in his 4 games, pretty much exactly what we expected based on his freshman season at Indiana. He averaged 12, 4, and 3, shooting 31% from the field. Their second-round selection, Maxwell Lewis, well, I'll just let his stats speak for themselves. The player that was really taking up most of the buzz for the Lakers was their second-round selection from a year ago, Max Christie. He was averaging 19, 6, and 4, shooting 50% from 3. We've always got to be careful overhyping these second and third year guys in the summer league, but there's no question his shot creation and ability to slow the game down and play at his own pace looked legit. It'll be interesting to see if there's a role for him next season. Things really heat up at 16, where the Jazz would take none other than Keyonte George, someone that's always been an elite shot creating talent, but his efficiency likely kept him out of the lottery in the recent draft. Well, he came out in the summer league to tell everyone that was a mistake. He showed up in clearly better shape than we saw as a freshman at Baylor. His first 3 games would come in Utah, where he averaged 16, 5, and 4 on pretty poor efficiency. But then things really got rolling in Vegas, where he was easily one of the most impressive rookies. He averaged 22 points, shooting 52% from the field and 44% from 3, taking 9 attempts a game. Nearly just as impressive as the scoring was his passing, as he was averaging over 6 assists. Now remember that Rudy Gobert trade, just so we're keeping tabs. So far, that's turned into Walker Kessler, who, when considering he's already one of the better rim protectors in the league and has 3 years left on a rookie scale contract compared to Gobert's $40 million contract, an argument can be made that he is comparable, maybe even higher value than Gobert as things stand today. Well, the next selection from that trade has turned into, well, Keyonte George. Insane. Oh, and they still have 4 first-round picks and a pick swap coming Utah's way from that trade. The 15th pick was the Atlanta Hawks, who selected Michigan guard Kobe Buffkin, someone that managed to lead them in scoring, but that's really not saying much. He averaged 14 points, shooting 33% from the field and less than 14% from 3. Oh, and 3.6 assists to 4.6 turnovers. It's early, it's just the summer league, but they might be a little concerned they made the wrong pick based on what we saw from the player taken with the very next selection. The 14th pick to the Pelicans is a player that if you've been following, you know I have very strong conviction surrounding. UConn Husky sharpshooter Jordan Hawkins. His summer league didn't go quite as I hoped. He averaged 13 points and 5 rebounds, shooting just 32% from the field and 25% from 3. But there were some promising takeaways. We also need to remember he suffered an injury in the first game, an injury that directly following it saw him uncharacteristically miss 4 free throws in a row. Who knows the lingering effects that injury had, but assuming he was fully healthy, he looked impressive defensively, which many deemed a serious knock. Outside of the first game, we saw them write up very little off-ball action for him, which he's come accustomed to, forcing him into a lot more on-ball activity, where he looked pretty solid, at least compared to these Twitter draft analyst expectations. There was a lot of rookie mistakes, multiple traveling violations attacking closeouts, foot out of bounds on 3-point attempts, but my confidence hasn't wavered in the slightest. If there's one thing you are a fool to question, That is Hawkins' ability to shoot the basketball. The same thing applies to the 13th pick by the Raptors, Dorothy Slippers Grady Dick. He averaged 16 and 6 in his 4 games, but he shot less than 30% from 3. We all know that is not very telling. In fact, I think Grady actually turned some heads with what he showed with his shot creating, especially in the mid-range. 12 was the Mavericks, who after a trade down, selected Duke big and last year's #1 high school recruit in the country, Derek Lively. His 5 games were really just not that surprising. He was a solid rim protector and rim runner, keeping his fouls under control, something we didn't see from many through the summer league. He averaged 8 points and 8 boards on really high efficiency, but his shots were pretty much exclusive to the paint. We didn't see him connect on his couple 3-point attempts, something that many, including myself, were hoping would be a bigger part of his game after what we saw in the pre-draft process. 11 was a pretty surprising selection by the Magic, who decided to go with 6'8" Michigan sharpshooter Jett Howard. Through his 3 games, it didn't seem like he had any problem adjusting to the line taking a step back. He averaged 13 points. Over half his attempts were coming beyond the arc, where he was shooting 40%. This Orlando team needs shooting. Hopefully, they found that here with Jett. 10 was the Oklahoma City Thunder, who after trading up with the Dallas Mavericks, selected Kentucky point guard Cason Wallace. Wallace didn't join the team till Vegas, but man, did he get off to a good start. He likely put together the best rookie debut of this year's Summer League. He would lead the Thunder in scoring with 20 points. But that's not what had Thunder fans, including myself, overly excited. It was how he scored those points. 6 of his 7 shots came from 3, a range many were concerned about when it came to Wallace. Considering that most of his stock is coming from his defense, when he was shooting like that, it was hard not to feel like the Thunder just hit another home run. Now Wallace would cool off pretty significantly after that. He would play a total of 5 games where he averaged 11, 3, and 3, shooting less than 35% from the field, but still an impressive 39% from 3. The 9th overall pick to the Jazz was UCF forward Taylor Hendricks, someone that is nothing short of an elite prospect that we sadly didn't get to see out there due to injury. But this situation really just fills Jazz fans with even more hope and excitement considering what we saw from Keontae George. This is a team that was supposed to be headed to a long rebuild following the departure of both Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. But in a blink of an eye, they've stumbled into last year's most improved winner Lauri Markkanen. They had one of the top rookies this past season in Walker Kessler, and now their selection in the middle of the first round is playing out of their mind. But that's just one of their 3 first-round selections and not even the highest one. Oh, and they still have a million first-round picks headed their way. This rebuild is not going to last long at all. Just ahead of Hendricks is Jarace Walker, who was selected by the Pacers after trading down a spot. On paper, it doesn't seem like he had a great summer league. 14 points and 8 rebounds, shooting just 34% from the field and 18% from 3. But considering what we know he brings on defense, seeing him take 7 threes a game, seeing him confident off the dribble, sometimes even taking the ball up, this was far from a disappointing summer league. This pick and roll floater, this assist taking the ball up, this pick and pop 3, this fake handoff floater, this isolation drive is all from one of his summer league performances. 7 was one of the more interesting and mysterious prospects in the draft, Bilal Coulibaly, who the Wizards ended up trading up to get. He was completely off the radar for the draft just a year ago, but after jumping up a tier in the French league and eventually teaming up with Victor Wembanyama, which some suggest had a big effect on his draft stock, he ends up cracking the top 7 on the back of his ridiculous physical profile and potential on both ends. In terms of his box score numbers, it wasn't great. 12 points on 41-18 splits, but we also need to mention he was averaging 2.3 blocks a game at the wing. Now, no one was expecting some earth-shattering performance from Coulibaly. He's the biggest project in the lottery and by a mile. Overall, it felt like he lived up to the hype defensively and showed off a fluidity with the ball in his hands that has to get you excited about his future. 6 was the Orlando Magic, with their first of 2 lottery selections, where they would take Anthony Black, another guy that kind of showed exactly what we expected. An oversized playmaker with solid defense that's solid attacking the basket, but can't shoot at all. He was at the helm of some of the least spacing in college basketball this past year, and during the summer league, while he impressed in many aspects, there were stretches where what felt like a complete lack of shooting at such a ball-dominant position really clogged up the offense. He averaged 11 points, shooting 41% from the field and just 17% from 3. It really feels like his future outlook is blatantly clear. If he can at least become a league average or just even respectable shooter, he is going to be a problem. But if that shooting doesn't advance, and quickly at that, the future is pretty cloudy, especially with him being a low-volume scorer in general. Now, there is some similar concern for the 5th overall pick to the Pistons, Ausar Thompson, but likely not to the degree of Black. Thompson's numbers don't jump out to you. 14 points and 4 assists, shooting 47% from the field and 27% from 3. seemingly pedestrian numbers, but he was easily one of the most impressive rookies I saw out there at the Summer League. Him and his brother both have this weird thing where they run around on the tips of their toes, the twinkle-toed twins, I guess. But it makes them so light on their feet at all times, allowing them to change speed and direction with the ball in their hands in a blink of an eye. Assur's shot creation attacking the basket seems inevitable, but one of the more intriguing skill sets he displayed was his passing. Playing alongside his brother his entire life, he hasn't been able to show off just how productive of a playmaker he really is. I couldn't help but envision a future at the point guard position, obviously disregarding the roster he's joining. But again, what seems likely to define whether he lives up to this high of a selection is the shooting. His shot looked pretty solid from a form perspective, but 27% from 3 and less than 65% from the line is concerning in terms of his immediate shooting ability. We didn't get to see much from his twin brother and 4th overall pick to the Rockets, Amin Thompson, as he suffered an injury in his first game, but what we did see from him was really impressive. He put up 16 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds, 3 steals, and 4 blocks at the point guard position. He shot 6 for 13 from the field, made his lone 3-point attempt, and both him and his brother already look like lockdown perimeter defenders. There it is, the twinkle toe gallop, then the finish. That right there seems to be his go-to move right now. The left hand on the right side. It felt like he took that shot at least 5 times in that game, but it was working. Now, as we've said with the last 2 prospects, the shooting is really what's going to dictate his ceiling. Yes, he made his lone 3-point attempt, but I highly doubt that shooting form is giving many confidence about that side of his game. I really do wish we got to see more from him. The same applies to the 3rd overall pick, Scoot Henderson, who started out on absolute fire. Less than a minute into the game, he's hitting this contested midi, then taking a min off the dribble for a reverse finish, another step back midi, step back 3, coast to coast lay-in. This is all in the first quarter of his very first Summer League game, a quarter in which he ends with 13 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists. Twitter is on fire with the I told you so's, and well, it felt justified. Unfortunately though, he would miss his next 6 shots, then get injured, knocking him out for the rest of the Summer League. Twitter would get quiet after that, but that doesn't change the fact that Scoot looked the part. I'm not sure the same can be said for the 2nd overall selection to the Hornets, Brandon Miller. He kicked off his first game by going to the half, having shot 1 for 5 from the field, having committed 4 personal fouls, and given up 3 turnovers. Luckily, a strong second half ended his night with 18 points on 5 for 11 shooting. In his second game, he would get off to a slightly better start. At half, he would have 6 points. Personal fouls. A whopping 0 points. Unsurprisingly, Twitter was having a field day. He then goes to Vegas, where he averages 17 and 8 across his 3 games, shooting just 35% from the field and 26% from 3. 5 for 15 in his first game, 4 for 18 in his second game, but luckily, he went home on a solid note. He dropped 26 on over 50% shooting against the Blazers. Undoubtedly, he struggled in the Summer League, but again, it's the Summer League. There's no problem having takeaways. The fouling tendency is one for sure, but be careful assuming that one of the best perimeter scorers in college basketball is going to continue to struggle with wide open attempts beyond the arc. And then finally, we reach the player that had people waiting in line all night to see him play. One of the greatest prospects the game has ever seen, the #1 pick to the Spurs, Victor Wembanyama. This was one, if not the most hyped up debuts in Summer League history, and for many, a disappointing one. He shot just 2 for 13 from the field and finished the night with 9 points and 8 rebounds. Now, he also did block 5 shots, but the excitement surrounding that side of his game was negated by him getting dunked on. For those out there concerned, I do think it's worth mentioning that LeBron James scored just 14 points in his Summer League debut and actually also got dunked on. Now, luckily for Wembanyama, his second game was a much different story. There was something very clear between the first game and the start of the second. Wemby was nervous. This was unprecedented attention. He was already in the same news headlines as Britney Spears. Defensively, he looked overly conscious of the 3-second rule. Offensively, the expectation of being this off-the-dribble scorer seemed a little overbearing. We were seeing him hesitate, not running out in transition at the speed we're accustomed to. But then in that second game, he got the ball in the basket a couple times. He was getting to the free throw line. Slowly, the confidence was clearly going up and it felt like it was gone after flexing this and one out of the half. Then we see the Spurs start to shrink the lead. Wemby comes back into the game in the fourth, where he is not shying away from the moment. A fadeaway to bring it to 4, a block on the other end, and then a 3 to make it a 1-point game. Unfortunately, the Spurs couldn't close it out, but Wemby finished the night with 27 points, 12 rebounds, and 3 blocks, to just 1 foul, shooting 9 for 14 from the field and 2 for 4 from 3. It was a disappointing first game, but he ended up walking away from the Summer League with one of the top performances, if not the top performance of all the rookies. It's a recent development that the Summer League is even talked about outside of the spaces of die-hard basketball fans. It's especially a recent development for players to be heavily judged for their Summer League performance. It's all about takeaways, and if you went away from that second Wemby game not seeing something special, especially given the context of the hype and bouncing back from that first game, you might need some glasses.